Howdy. In The Simpsons, Mr. Burns is probably the richest character in all of Springfield.
Sir, I've arranged for the people of Australia to join hands tonight and spell out your name with candles. There's a satellite hookup on that monitor if you'll just turn your head slightly.
No time.
But I've been curious lately of how much he actually earns and how much he's worth. But I mostly do top 10 lists, so maybe we can get the help of someone who's an expert on this sort of thing.
Hey there, Strider. So you're trying to work out Mr. Burns' total worth?
Howdy, 10K Bill. You bet. Thanks for the great idea. I understand you're also doing a video on how broke The Simpsons are on your channel.
I sure am. I love these videos.
Would you be able to offer your expertise on this?
Yeah, absolutely. But before we really get started, let's set some rules for calculating The Simpsons' crazy universe.
Good idea. To start with, we'll be doing our best to make The Simpsons timeline make sense. The Simpsons use what's called a floating timeline. This means that despite the show taking place in whatever year the episode's originally airing in, the characters never really age throughout the years.
We'll be kind of ignoring that as best we can and working under the assumption that each season takes place in one year, with season 1 being 1990, season 2 being in 1991, and so on and so forth. One more thing of note, originally we were planning on taking this video up to season 9's episode The Principal and the Pauper, which is typically considered the series' jump the shark moment. However, a few episodes before that, in season 8's episode The Old Man and the Lisa, Mr. Burns loses all of his money, so we'll be ending our calculations right before that.
Charles Montgomery Burns was supposedly born September 15, 1886. He was the second youngest of 12 children, and he was taken in by his rich grandfather, Wainwright Montgomery Burns, who transformed him into the heartless businessman we've all come to know.
I cannot be stopped. Kill his acorns and make him watch.
Eventually, Mr. Burns will graduate from Yale in 1914, write a book, and much later, fight in World War II.
We can fast forward through all this because eventually, in 1974, Mr. Burns would open up his most famous enterprise, the Springfield nuclear power plant.
In the 80s, nuclear power plants could cost billions of dollars to manufacture, so we'll be working under the assumption that he basically spent his entire family fortune on building this power plant.
That makes sense. So let's start Mr. Burns at $0 in 1974. The first thing we need to do is figure out how much money Mr. Burns is making from the nuclear power plant. Let's start by figuring out what the power plant's revenue is.
A nuclear power plant can generate 13,986 megawatts if running 24 hours a day. However, Mr. Burns' plant likely isn't running 24/7. We'll be having it operate for 12 hours a day, which means that it'll be generating half of the megawatts it could be, 6,984 megawatts per day.
Right, now we need to know how much they're selling their electricity for. Because we still don't know which state Springfield is actually in, we'll average out the price for electricity across each state.
So after some quick math, we can see that the power plant is making $2,374,560 a day. However, I don't think the power plant is selling 100% of what it's generating each day. Instead, I'll be having them sell 80%, which would be $1,899,648 every single day.
However, this is what the power plant is making, not just Mr. Burns. He has employees he has to pay and upkeep that needs to be well kept up with. In lieu of this, we'll be giving Mr. Burns a CEO salary with a general stock payout, with the rest of the power plant's money going into various lawsuits and cleanups, of which we know there would be very many.
So let's take a look at stock payment first. We know that the nuclear power plant does have a stock program in place because of the episode Burns verkaufen der Krokdruck.
I own stock?
Yes, all the employees got some in exchange for waiving certain constitutional rights.
In this episode, Homer sells his stocks in the company at 25 cents a share, just before they jump up in price. This shows that all of the employees have stock options in the company. However, I don't think that Mr. Burns is the kind of guy who'd be giving up any significant portion of control over his company. As a result, we'll be assuming that he's keeping 95% of the company.
But we're probably getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about how much the company is paying out. We'll do this by comparing the nuclear power plant to a larger company, Portland General Electric. That company had $1,991,000,000 in gross revenue in 2018. They have 211,375 stocks in circulation, and they paid out $6.16 per stock. That means they paid out $1,302,070 each year in stocks. This is 0.065% of their revenue. Now let's use that math for the Springfield nuclear power plant. We mentioned earlier that the nuclear power plant was making $1,899,648 every day. This would bring the plant's yearly gross revenue to $69,371,520. Let's take 0.065% of that, which would be $450,691.48 paid out in stocks each year. So finally, if Mr. Burns owns 95% of that, he would be making $428,156.91 each year.
However, this doesn't include the fact that he would likely be taking a CEO salary as well. In the utility industry, the average CEO salary is around $1.3 million, which is what we'll be giving Mr. Burns. And of course, we'll be adjusting these back for inflation for each year.
Now let's add up all of his incomes together, do some tax math, and we'll take out any minor expenses. After that, we'll be having Burnsy put away 35% of what's left into his account, where he'll be getting an average interest rate of 5%. We won't be having Mr. Burns investing in any stocks because of what we see in his stock portfolio in the episode The Old Man and Lisa, where he last checked his stocks right before the kickoff of the Great Depression. We can do this math each year until the start of the series in 1990, so at this point, Mr. Burns would have $2,514,231.97 in his bank account.
Now we can start going through the series. Nothing major happened in the first season, but in the second season, the power plant is hit with a huge fine for exactly $56,088,800. However, I believe that this would be paid off by a fund that Mr. Burns would have set aside for the nuclear plant with revenue that he himself wouldn't claim. With how beat up the power plant typically is and how many corners are cut, he likely has many potential lawsuits and would thus set aside a fund just in case.
And Season 3 has a few major instances of Mr. Burns making some serious cash. The first of these is in the episode Burns Verkaufen der Kraftwerk, where Mr. Burns sells the nuclear power plant for $100 million.
I grudgingly accept.
However, later in that same episode, he buys the power plant back at $50 million, which means he made $50 million within that episode. In that same season, in the episode Homer at the Bat, Mr. Burns places a $1 million bet on his softball team. To ensure his victory, Burns ends up hiring several prolific baseball players to the power plant. We'll assume that he made $500,000 after paying off all the professional players.
Because of how much money he's making this year, we'll be having him put away 97% of what he's making that year instead of the usual 35%.
My favorite week of the year. Sophisticated financial discussions with my fellow plutocrats.
Coming out of 1992, Mr. Burns has $39,179,821.47. The following year, 1993, which would be season 4, Mr. Burns is hit with a $3 million fine.
Next year in 1994, Mr. Burns builds his casino. The price for building casinos can vary pretty heavily, with most of the information we were able to find being related to Vegas. However, it would be much cheaper to build a casino somewhere like Springfield. For this, we'll be having Mr. Burns spend $20 million. However, now Mr. Burns has another form of new income coming in.
Excellent.
The average salary of a casino owner is $219,846, which we'll add in and adjust for inflation each year.
And because of his increased salary, we'll be having Mr. Burns put 45% of his income into his bank account. Coming out of 1994, Mr. Burns would have $20,633,728.89. The next year, Season 5, would be another big year for Mr. Burns.
For starters, in this year, Mr. Burns funds a biographical film with the Mexican equivalent to Steven Spielberg. Señor Spielbargo will be having him spend $500,000 on his venture.
In that same season, Mr. Burns races 25 world champion dog racers. He's stated to have made over $10 million at the point we see in the show, but will up him to $15 million. One final point in the season is when Mr. Burns tries to drill the oil under the Springfield Elementary School. For this failure, we'll be having Mr. Burns spend $1 million.
And similar to what we did last time Mr. Burns made some serious cash, we'll be having him put away more of his income this year than normal. 95% this time. Nothing major happened in the next 2 seasons, unless you count Mr. Burns giving Homer $500 to start a bowling team. But we included that in our calculations anyway, so no worries. So this brings our calculations to an end, before Mr. Burns loses all his money in 1997.
A few things of note before we get into the final numbers. We won't be taking the Springfield Opera House into consideration for this video, because it's somehow in place of King Toots, but not there in the next episode. This canonically doesn't make any sense, so it won't be counted.
As for Mr. Burns' mansion, after doing some research on what similar manors can cost, we'll be pricing it at $400 million today.
In 1997, right before Mr. Burns loses his fortune before basically regaining it, Mr. Burns has $33,680,532.79 in his bank account. His home, worth $400 million today, would be worth $249,720,375.73, and we'll be estimating that the nuclear power plant, which has been neglected and is barely running, would be worth $500 million. This gives Mr. Burns a total of $783,400,908.52 in 1997, which today would be the equivalent of $1,245,607,444.55.
Jeebus, with a net worth like that, it kind of explains how he can do this. Well, thanks for helping me discuss Mr. Burns' total worth, 10K Bill. I really appreciate your help and research with this. You do a lot of these sort of videos on your own channel, don't you?
Indeed I do. I've even looked at how much Mr. Krabs is worth and how broke the Simpsons are. You can find them over at 10K Productions.
And if you'd like to see me do more of these sort of videos in the future, let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.